Hi booktube, Aaron here. Hope you're doing okay. Today I just want to talk a little bit about The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I've just finished reading it and I just felt like I wanted to spend some time just chatting about it really. So this is going to be a fairly informal chat about the book, about some of the questions I have about it, maybe, and just some of the things that stood out to me. I'll try to give a rough outline of the plot. We'll see how that goes. But for me, I want to land it by the end. At a certain point in the book, towards the end, there's a courtroom sequence, and there's just a particular segment um, of um, of somebody's speech in this courtroom sequence that I want to maybe finish with. So I'm going to try and sort of gear things in that direction. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully, it'll make some kind of sense at the end. So this book, The Brothers Karamazov, is essentially a family saga about the Karamazov family. They're a very dysfunctional family. There are three brothers here. They have a miserly and rather distasteful father who really only cares about himself and his own pleasure. And the three sons are born of two wives. So he has one son with his first wife, and then she dies, and then eventually remarries and has another two sons, and then she dies as well. One of them, it said, actually commits suicide. I don't think both of them do, and I actually struggle to remember which one it is that commits suicide and which one it is that potentially dies a natural death. I can't quite remember, but certainly he doesn't really treat either of them terribly well at all. And there's also potentially a fourth brother as well who is um, born out of wedlock and is kept as a servant. And so these brothers, from eldest to youngest, there's Dimitri, who is very much like his father. He's a sensualist and just cares about drinking, eating, women, enjoying life a day at a time. But he squanders his money and is very rash and I don't know, probably relies quite a lot on his instincts and what he's feeling in the moment. Um, then we've got Ivan, who is, I think, the only of the brothers who's been to university. Um, I think a lot of the characters find him quite aloof or quite distant. He's certainly very skeptical and nihilistic, and he's the kind of person who will entertain certain ideas, certain positions, just to see where their logical progression will go. Um, but yeah, he's not afraid to deal with some very uh, dark topics, I suppose, and try to wrestle with some dark questions. Um, then we've got Alyosha, and he has gone off in quite a different path to his other two brothers. He's joined a monastery, um, and then the brother who is born out of wedlock and is a servant in the household is Smerdyakov, and he, I don't know, he's quite hard. I find it quite hard what to make of him. He's certainly a bit of an opportunist, and he kind of idolizes certain characters as well. But he's quite aloof as well, and even though he's in quite a humble position in life, I think because he um, I don't know, because of what he thinks of his own intellect, he does look down on people, and he's maybe a bit of an egoist, maybe, not too sure. But there are our brothers. The book opens with a kind of family reunion, a rather charged family reunion, because the father is in the middle of a feud with Dimitri. They're quarrelling over money, and also over a woman as well. Both of them being centralists, have both fallen head over heels over the same woman, over Grushenska. And it's interesting, I think it's important to note that we don't really meet her for some time, and we don't really get her opinions about what she thinks about either of them for quite some time either. Um, and so, they're very much, they're both projecting quite a lot on her. And this meeting, I think it just throws a lot into disarray. Ivan is staying with his father. Alyosha is at his monastery nearby. And Dimitri is staying elsewhere in the town because of the quarrel. And it seems like while Ivan's been staying with his father, it looks like they're getting on really well. Smerdyakov, being the servant, is kind of idolizing Ivan, and he's made quite an impression on him. But by the end of this visit, Ivan really detests his father. And essentially a lot of the sort of middle section of this book, it really consists of Alyosha going around trying to find his brother Dimitri, because he feels like Dimitri is going to do something rash. And it's just about the conversations he has eventually with Dimitri, also with Ivan and some of the other characters that we meet. And in these conversations, I suppose a lot of the issues that Dostoevsky wants to talk about come up. And there are really two questions or two issues that at least stand out to me. And I think they're kind of, I think they are kind of related. The first, and they're both, I think, questions raised by Ivan, being the guy who likes to posit certain positions, and it's, with him being quite nihilistic, you can't really say he believes much of anything, and so he's quite a hard nut to crack. But here's one of the things that he posits, or he's said to have posited. Essentially, he's built up a bit of a straw man by saying that if there's any natural law of being able to love your neighbour, being able to love your fellow man, it really exists because of the belief of immortality. So I suppose in one sense that if we're immortal, we're going to have to keep on living with each other, but maybe also because of there being a god and some kind of cosmic justice or something like that. And so maybe in fear of that might be another reason that we might want to love our neighbour. But if we take this away, and here's the quotations, who says, if you were to destroy humanity's belief in immortality, not only love, but every vital force for making possible the continuation of earthly life would dry up. Moreover, then nothing would be judged immoral. Everything would be permitted, even cannibalism. So there's kind of one of the issues that, if God doesn't exist, or if we don't believe that we're immortal, is there any sort of moral code? Do we really owe each other any love or anything like that? So that's one of the questions. And then there's a kind of other side to that, potentially something, and it's brought up when Ivan and Alyosha are having a bit of a heart-to-heart, and Ivan says, "I could never understand how it's possible to love one's neighbours." And it's interesting that he's saying that, and so he's obviously still feeling that there must be some reason that we love our neighbours, that we do treat each other humanely. Then he says, it's exactly one's neighbours, in my estimation, that it's impossible to love. Though one might love one's more distant neighbours, to love a man, it's necessary that he be hidden from view. Once he's shown his face, the love vanishes. So maybe it's easier to love humanity abstractly than it is actually in person. And, I think we all have individuals who wind us up, so it's kind of understandable. Alyosha's response is interesting because he's trying to push against it, but you can see that he doesn't have much to I don't know, he doesn't really have much to respond with. So he says that Father Zosima, the elder in his monastery, Father Zosima has spoken about this more than once, remarked Alyosha. He also said that the face of a man often hinders people from loving, people who are inexperienced in love. But there's a great deal of love in humanity, and it comes close to being like Christ's love. This I know myself, Ivan. And so I suppose he's just going off his own experience, and that there's a lot of, I don't know which direction he's going with, whether he's saying that maybe he's trying to appeal to Ivan to say, deep down there is a lot of love in you and a potential to love. Or maybe it's that you might be able to, if you looked hard enough, you might be able to see love in humanity, and that might be a reason for you to love them, if that makes any sense. And so yeah, it's interesting that we have a kind of doubting nihilist, maybe, because he's reported to have said, this thing about everything being permitted, and that there is no natural law. And yeah, he's asking this question of, he still feels this compulsion to love his neighbours. So that's sort of one end of it. I'm thinking of where else to go. There's a murder, so we could go there next. It's not really much of a spoiler. It says on the first page that the father, Fyodor Karamazov, is killed, and it's suspected that it's patricide, that one of his sons has killed him. And again, then we're sort of looking for motivations in certain characters, and he's incredibly unclear about it. In my first reading, I went through, and it seems like there's just one character who's really unfortunate. Everything points to them, it seems, and yet from certain conversations that we've seen between characters, it's obvious that it wasn't them. The second time through, I was realizing that all of the, I suppose, everything feeding into the accusation, but also everything feeding into the defense is really circumstantial, and that actually, I think the longer you spend thinking about this book, the more we see it, a lot of it is just gossip, and that actually, very well could have been this person who killed them, but it could have been someone else. It could have been none of the people we think it was. And I think Dostoevsky quite cleverly just creates this space around the murder and this confusion. And actually, he's kind of showing us that in these moments of crisis, it's, quite difficult to actually see the straight line. So that's, again, it's the beating heart of the book. And I think once you get into that kind of murder mystery, it's not really much of a murder mystery, I don't think. But I think once you get into that, it becomes much more of a page turner, and it's frustrating. People who know a lot aren't saying what they know and things like that. So that's, if you get frustrated with your characters, that's something to look out for. There's something that that Dimitri says. Let's see if I can find it, because it's quite odd. And essentially, he's a centralist, and sometimes I wonder whether that there's much of a difference between Dimitri's sensualism, their father's sensualism, and the kind of nihilism that Ivan shows. And he says, oh yeah, here it is. I've got two notebooks, so that's a bit confusing. Dimitri says, I intend to live in filth until the end. It's sweeter living in filth. Everyone insults it, but everyone lives in it, only in secret. But I do so openly, and the other scoundrels have attacked me for my openness, or my open-heartedness. And And so then seeing where Dimitri is coming from, it's maybe not too different from someone like Smerdyakovh, who kind of looks down on people, but that's because of his intellect, and he feels like he's superior in that way. For Dimitri, his rashness and his sensualism, I think, comes from honesty, and yet it's kind of an illusion, I think, and I'm really struggling to work out where to go with this, because it just goes in so many other directions. It is quite hard to know exactly what to think of it, and so I might try and move it back towards that courtroom scene, and wrap things up a bit. So one of our characters is on trial for the murder of Fyodor Karamazov. The whole trial, people have been shot down essentially for their own virtue or lack of virtue. So if they're not seen to be a good person, suddenly what they've had to say, that their statement is immediately questioned and shot down. And then here's what, towards the end of the trial, this is what the defense says. He says, "Gentlemen of the jury, if we convict him, he'll say, these people have done nothing for my fate, for my upbringing, for my education, to make me better, to make me a man. These people have given me nothing to eat or drink. They haven't visited me in prison, in my nakedness, and they have sent me into personal servitude, or into penal servitude. Even now, I'm with them. I owe them nothing and owe no one anything forever and ever. They're wicked, and I will be too. Don't you wish to punish him terribly, cruelly, with the most dreadful penalty you can imagine, but at the same time to save him and revive his soul forever? If so, then overwhelm him with your mercy." And so I suppose then that question of, how are we to treat each other is brought up again, but in a way there's no real framework behind it. It's not saying that you don't need to have a religious or philosophical framework behind the decisions that we make. But I think this lawyer here is making the claim that we need to treat people well because it's the best for them. And it's as simple as that if we're gonna continually punish people cruelly, it's just going to keep rubbing off on them, and they're not going to feel any reason to love us back. If we hate our neighbour, then they're never going to learn to love us. And so just to love someone because it's really what's best for them, and it's what's best for us as well. So I think that's kind of where, I don't know, that's where the book ended, kind of for me. The actual story, the last scene, it does end in a very, very poignant place, a point of, I suppose, really, it's a really dreadful situation. I won't say what it is, and yet the characters in that situation are, I suppose, getting through it. One, by remembering each other and the suffering that they've gone through together, and also loving each other and remembering each other. And for a very depressing and very dark book, for me, there's just a feeling of elation towards the end, and I think it's seeing the best in humanity despite all of the evil and the cruelty that we do to each other. And so I think a lot of people, they think of Dostoevsky as a very depressing writer, and he's certainly one of those writers who when he sees darkness and cruelty, he won't turn away from it just because it's, I don't know, because it might be too hard to look at it. He will look at it, and he'll try to redeem it somehow, or to find something worth living for despite that. And so it's a really beautiful book. It's a book that will, I think, it'll keep you questioning everything, which is good. It just throws up so many possibilities. And so don't think that the conclusions that I've come to are really the ones that Dostoevsky wanted, or even the conclusions that anyone could come to. I think there's a lot going on in this book. To call what I've just said a conclusion is probably wrong as well, because I think this book is going to carry on living on in my head, and I may change, it may change my mind about certain elements of it. But it's really a brilliant book. I've tried to say as much as I can without giving too much of the story away, just in case some of you watching are the kind of readers where that might be a little annoying. So I think I'll leave it there. If you haven't read this before, I hope you give it a go. Certainly give it a lot of space, a lot of time. Don't try to rush it. It doesn't really matter how long it takes for you to read it. And again, I'll just recommend this translation by Michael R. Katz. It's just really, really good. I read the Constance Garnett translation the first time round, and I really liked it. But this time through, everything's just much more clear and immediate, and I don't know, it just feels like everything's in Technicolor and alive, and the characters are speaking directly to you. So I think that's everything I want to say. As I said, if you haven't picked it up and this sounds interesting, it'll be great to hear if you've sort of decided to pick it up. But also, if you've read this and you have your own opinions about it, even if they're contrary to what I've said, it'd be great to hear what you think as well. So I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.